Yeah, man. Like you were there. I thought I remember seeing you post that you were ringside reporting, right? Were you ringside reporting that night?
Yeah, more like topside reporting, but I like the roof seats better because I can see the whole ring.
You
But
was you was in the building.
that was there.
Dude, what was it? That is that is the it's got to be the biggest event, man, of this era, man, since really I would think May Pacquiao. What was it like being inside of that building, dude? It had to have been outrageously electric up in there.
It was electric, but it wasn't as electric as a Canelo fight. I feel, but I obviously Canelo is probably the biggest star in boxing. This is probably the biggest fight. There were some empty seats. I mean, I know someone was saying it was a sellout, but I was looking
Mm.
like right at empty seats, so I don't know. I don't know. Maybe some guys bought tickets and they couldn't resell them. I think that may have been an issue, but it was definitely a big fight. It definitely didn't play out the way I thought it was going to play out. I'm not really surprised that Crawford won the way he did. I just, when you have two of the best fighters in the world in there, it can play out in a variety of different ways because boxing is all about level. So if you put in, a novice fighter against, an average fighter, the average fighter is going to destroy the novice. It's kind of like even if you have a little bit of skill, you can destroy a guy. You put a good fighter against a great fighter, the great fighter is going to expose the good fighter. You put in a really good fighter against a generational talent, and the generational talent, that being Terence Crawford in this case, is just going to wipe out, the other guy. And that's what we got. We thought it was a 50-50 fight, and it really wasn't. It's basically as soon as the bell rung, Spence was landing good jabs, but the counter shots that Crawford was throwing, he didn't land any big counters in the first round. The first thing I noticed is like, holy crap, like Terence Crawford's a lot quicker. Like the punches that he was throwing at Errol, they were coming in with heat, man. And even I can see from Spence's eyes, after he was trying to block a shot, he was like, whoo, like I don't know what just came at me, but that thing was coming. Um,
So let me ask, man. You haven't been there. Obviously, we have we're looking through the TV and all that type of stuff, and I'm sure by this point you've probably heard all these like it's these rumors that are like crazy right now. And one of the big
yeah,
ones is that came out what maybe about 2 days or so after the fight is Terrence, well, Spence supposedly suffering from um like some neurological like damage still that he still has like residual neurological damage. Is that something, man, that you were able to see while there, like seeing him walk to the arena or seeing him in the back or something like? Was there any indication to you there that this dude just ain't like he ain't all the way here right now?
well, I mean, his eyes did look a little bit looked a little bit different. I thought that maybe dehydration, overtraining could be any of those. He didn't look like the same Errol Spence that we're used to seeing, at least that I'm used to seeing. I didn't really think about neurological damage. I thought about maybe overtraining camp, poor rehydration. That's what I was thinking. I know that the first thing that comes to people's mind is maybe, oh, that's the car crash. And
Yeah,
I heard that, car wrecks like that, you can suffer from the damage like over time. So maybe that's the case. But I don't have any proof of that. And I don't really want to talk about that because I feel like that kind of downgrades Bud Crawford's performance, which
a
was
little bit.
excellent.
Yep.
And but let's be real, at the same time, like Spence was still landing good shots. So I don't, I honestly don't think it had anything to do with the car crash. I just think that the car crash in this case was Bud Crawford. Bud Crawford was the car, and Errol Spence was the target because people ignore the fact that Spence was still coming forward. He was still landing good jabs to the head
Yep.
and the body. He just had bad defense. And when you're against the best counterpuncher in the world, and well, I'll start with the second round. So Spence, he typically likes to throw. He tends to lunge forward with his jab, but he leaves his head exposed. And now other fighters in the past haven't been able to capitalize on that. But Terence Crawford, being the best counterpuncher in the world, or at least one of them, in a way, is a pretty great counterpuncher as well. He knew it was coming, and the way that Spence set up his feet, you can tell from when he was in that southpaw stance. His back foot kind of gave it away. It's a little split second. You can see that Spence is going to go down. Like the way that there's a little bit of I would call it a flinch. He flinched just a little bit, and that was enough for Crawford to know that he's about to throw a jab. And as soon as he threw that jab, Crawford blocked it with his left. Boom, hits him with the left hand, counters him with the jab, and Spence was down on the canvas. And from there, the fight was pretty much one-sided. Spence was still landing with good shots, but every shot that Crawford connected, with every shot that he landed, Spence's legs would buckle. It's like his legs were brittle, in my opinion. And, he didn't have the sturdy base that he normally has. And he was standing a little tall. It just didn't seem like he was prepared. And that's ultimately on him and his team. You can't really take that away from Bud. He came prepared, and you could see it at the weigh-in. I'm a guy that I don't typically like to switch picks, but Spence did look a little bit off at the weigh-in as well. Just looked like he killed to make weight. I heard from my sources that he struggled to make 147, and that Terence made 147 comfortably. He was eating and drinking throughout fight week, so he made 147 with no problem. Spence kind of strained to get there, so it was kind of that. Crawford, being incredibly skilled. Spence is obviously very skilled as well, but his flaws definitely benefited Crawford in this case because, like I said, every time Spence made a mistake, Crawford saw it and countered. I mean, he landed 60% of his power punches.
Insane.
Oof,
It is an
nuts.
insane number, especially at
Yeah,
a fight of that magnitude. Yeah, and you're right, man. I think, and I said this on Twitter earlier today. Oh, it's not Twitter anymore, is it? It's X
it's
now or something like
X.
that.
It's a
Anyway,
porno now.
um, I said this earlier. Like, I think there is a lot of sympathy for Errol Spence because of the car crash, and I think it's a situation where like we're as human beings we're just naturally drawn to those perseverance stories. That's why Rocky was such a great, like, what I'm saying, set of movies, man. It was that everybody was connected to that perseverance of the story. And I think that's what everybody wanted to see. Right? I think it's what they wanted to see. They wanted to see this guy who went through a car crash and had all this stuff that happened to him, the eye injury, and then he had what, two additional accidents. I think he was rearing it twice. Um
I think I got rear-ended once. I think it might have been in December last year.
yeah, and then it's like goes into the biggest fight of his life. I think everybody was really looking for that Rocky story still, of him just going in there and doing what he needed to do. I mean, outside of the people who picked Terence Crawford to win, and we didn't get that. We got a really lopsided fight that no one, I don't care who you are, nobody was
Exactly.
really expecting. I had a couple people, I won't say anybody, but I had a couple people who, I had one dude that actually said his prediction was a ninth round TKO for Crawford. So
Yeah.
he's the one person with the who
But I
had
can't
a
think of
magic ball.
anybody. I can't think of anybody who actually thought that it would have been a one-sided blowout from start to finish.
Yeah, no
Un-
doubt.
yeah.
So what would you think, man? Being that from the weigh in and all that type of stuff, sources obviously. Do you think that it would be any different at 154 pounds? Do you think 154-pound Errol Spence is a tougher out for 154-pound Terence Crawford?
I think he would be a tougher out, but obviously it kind of depends on his preparation and his mindset because now he's lost, so now he has a loss on his record. And I think when you look at Crawford, he's had a couple of tough fights. Sean Porter, he was arguably down on the cards. Kaviaskis landed a lot of hard shots on him. So he's been in some tough fights. Errol had never really been rocked really in his career. So when he got dropped by Terence Crawford, in my mind, it was kind of like, this is the first time I've ever been, you know, like other than car crashes, this is the first time I've really faced adversity in the ring. And it was just a completely different thing. I think Derek James kind of froze up too, realizing, wow, like they didn't expect to get beaten in this fashion. And it's like they didn't have a plan. It's like once their plan fell apart, they didn't really have a plan B. So it's as if they expected to kind of not really steamroll Crawford, but kind of just win. And once that fell apart, they really had no idea what to do. So I feel like what they really need to accomplish is, just, well, first rest, spend time with your family, grind, get back into training. And this is if Spence is at 100%. Who knows what the real story is? I think it should be up to Errol to really tell us if there's anything there. And if there isn't, just go get back into the tape room, whatever you have there in Dallas. Study on all the things that you messed up on, and there are a lot of things because like I said, Errol was landing a lot of good shots. He was landing hard shots, but defensively, he was horrible. He was horrible in that fight. So it's like in that seventh round, he landed that big left hand, but unbeknownst to Spence, he had already been clipped by a huge right uppercut and was on the way down like at the same time. And that's how good Terence Crawford is at timing. And I think it wasn't just because Errol said that his timing was off. It wasn't just the timing; it was the defense. Crawford was timing him with these big shots that he normally doesn't get caught with, but he had been getting away with it in previous fights. And just because you're getting away with it against, a Sean Porter or your Dennis Ugas or a Danny Garcia, Terence Crawford is just a different animal. And he proved that in the ring on Saturday. So I think that, a 154 can be different. It just depends. Crawford, his job is to, well, just keep doing what you're doing. Obviously, it's like if it's not broke, don't fix it. That's the saying in NASCAR. But in this case, just keep doing what you're doing. And it's Errol Spence's job to, correct the mistakes, but also potentially find openings to expose against Crawford. But it's going to be hard because, in the back of Errol's mind, that fight is going to be there. And
Yeah.
it's going to be hard to overcome that.
Yeah, I think
But
so.
like we've seen in UFC, it was I know people don't really like UFC. I'm not a big UFC guy either, but growing up in Yuma, Arizona, everyone loved UFC. Matt Serra and Georges St. Pierre. St. Pierre was winning. He got caught with a shot, got knocked out, and in the rematch, he got Serra back. So is it probable? Maybe not. But is it improbable? No, because these two guys are incredible fighters. So anything can happen. But in my opinion, I think Bud still wins. But I don't think it's going to be as easy as it was the first time around.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing, man. Like I've seen a lot of people get asked, is this a situation where do we want a rematch? Is there going to be a appetite for a rematch? I've kind of seen it split 50-50 a little bit. Some people are like, yeah, 154 pounds for sure. That's what, 7 less pounds that you have to cut. That'll make
Maybe make
anybody.
maybe make the pay-per-view a little cheaper because it's going to be a tough sell. Are you going to be willing to pay the same price for a fight that was a complete blowout the first time? I think most people would be like, maybe I won't spend $80 this time. Maybe I'll spend 40. Maybe don't even put it on pay-per-view. Put it on national television for everyone to watch, and really make casual fans. Of course, I'm sure executives at companies are like, no, not pay-per-view.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Not gonna happen, buddy. But it was a good thought.
With that, and I wasn't even thinking about this question. Brought it up. I know you said that there were a couple of empty seats up in there. Are there any projections that you're hearing on your side as far as what the potential dollar amount could be as far as pay-per-view numbers? Like, how much did they do for this fight?
I think the gate actually came out earlier this morning. I think the gate did like between 20 and $21 million. So that's a good number. It wasn't as high as Tank Garcia, but it
Mm.
was up there. So they did a pretty good number, for two guys that, by themselves don't necessarily generate a lot of pay-per-views. It really shows you when you put two good guys together, when you put the best against the best, people actually want to see that. They don't want to see Spence fighting Ocampo, and they don't want to see Spence fighting Avanesian. They want to see, not Spence Avanesian, Crawford Avanesian from last year. So when you put the best against the best, you get good numbers. And as far as a pay-per-view number, I believe that at the high end, it did as high as 788,000, if my math is right. So between 700 and 788, which in my opinion is a great number.
Yeah.
If it accomplished that. Because again, the pay-per-view numbers, Spence, I think, was averaging I know he did like 350,000 for one. Yeah, yada yada yada. So he's in like the 300 range. Terence Crawford was in the 113 range, and they ended up doing more than double that. That's amazing. So that's a big win for boxing and for both fighters.
Yeah, I think that would definitely be a number short of what the initial projections were. I know people were talking about 1.2 million, things like that, coming close to those Floyd Mayweather numbers.
Yeah.
So 788, that'd be an interesting. I'd like to see when that number is all finalized. And well, you're probably going to get 3 or 4 different numbers that pop out anyway.
Yeah.
But what's next, man? Like, in your opinion, what's next for these two guys? Obviously, Terence Crawford has a lot of options. He's got Jamel Charlo. He's got Boots Ennis, which could be a potential if he decides to stick around at 147. Um, but Errol, man, I know he wants to get back in there again in December, which to me, I'm not gonna lie, from the way things look, that seems kind of insane to me that he would get back in there. I don't think that brother should fight for at least a year. I think they should hold him out for at least a year. Um, but yeah, man, like what's next for these two guys? Now, obviously, Terence Crawford is sitting at the top of the pound for pound list on pretty much everybody's list, but Inoue sitting at a comfortable number 2. But where do they go?
I think Errol, like you said, I think Errol should take a break. I don't know about a year. I mean, at least 6 months, maybe. Just spend time with family and maybe get a tune up. I know Spence hates tune ups, but after taking a vicious beating like that, I think a tune up would be beneficial. And I don't think anyone should judge Spence for
Oh,
taking
not
a
at
tune
all.
up. A lot of fighters have taken tune ups after losses. Pacquiao, after he got knocked out by Marquez, he fought Brandon Rios in China. So, and he's an 8 division champion. It's not I mean, as long as you're not fighting tune-ups consistently, and Spence has not done that at all in his career. So I think this would be, beneficial for him. As for Crawford, I think Boots Ennis would be a good fight, especially, I don't know if you heard, I think there's a show called Million something. I don't know. I only found out about this guy a few days ago because he pops up on my recommended videos on YouTube. But apparently he and Bud had a text conversation about Boots Ennis, and I think Terrence responded like, "Do you all want to see another dead body?" referring to Ennis.
I did see
And he
that.
leaked that. And he leaked it. That guy leaked it. And Bud
Yeah.
was like, "You're a clown for leaking my text messages." So, and I did happen to meet Jaron Ennis's brother, Farah, after the fight. I didn't know who he was at the time, but my brain was like, this guy looks like Boots, but it's not Boots. And it turns out it was his brother. So we talked about that fight. And initially I was like, I don't think Bud's going to fight him. I don't think it's like enough reward. But now, after those text messages leaked, I actually think there is a benefit because that guy's show has a lot of viewers. You know, Bud's now the undisputed welterweight champion. I have people at work saying, "Hey, did you catch that fight between?" And the guy was like Terence Spence. I was like, first of all, that's not his name, but close enough. We'll go with Terence Spence.
The casuals know. The casuals know about the fight at the
The
least.
casuals know about it. So I think that fight would actually do well. And I don't know if you caught this. I need to change. Oh my goodness! So it was before the fight. You saw the TNT pay-per-view. You ever heard that TNT Sports?
Yeah, they had Terence
So
Crawford
they
versus
had
Joe
Terence
Joyce.
Crawford, Joe Joyce, and at first it was like Terence Crawford, so they had the name wrong. Then they were like, "Oh, it's not Terence, it's Terence Crawford versus like both wrong." I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, man. I think him versus Boots. I mean, 2 switch hitters, 2 guys who do it really well too. Um, and a lot of people think that it might be a jump too soon for somebody like Boots, man. He hasn't fought anybody relatively in the same stratosphere of a Terence Crawford, especially after what we just saw. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously he has potential fights, right? I mean, could a deal be struck between him and maybe an Alexis Rocha, or him and obviously Iman Stanionis is sitting out there. Um, I mean, Boots has.
I don't think those fights are like. I mean, honestly, let's be honest. I don't think Crawford Rocha is a very competitive fight.
No, I mean Boots.
That's a
I mean Ennis.
Yeah,
Ennis.
yeah.
Yeah.
Boots and Crawford would be a good fight. I think that is a step too far right now, but I don't think Ennis really cares. I think he really wants to prove that he belongs, and he's been waiting a long time for a shot. And his managers are probably like, "Let's wait this out." But if he waits too long, Terence is probably going to move to 154. So maybe they fight at 154. Terence is a WBO guy. They can make a fight. If he moves up to 154 and Charlo decides to move up to 160, after fighting Canelo at 168, I think they could make Bud and Tim Tszyu. Tim Tszyu is willing to prove himself. Maybe Terence and Tszyu could fight in Australia. Terence could go to Australia. I mean, this is a huge opportunity for Terence to build his brand, and I never thought he would get this opportunity. Because he wasn't really promoted very well, on the way up.
Agreed.
And people were kind of unfair to him. Maybe I was unfair to him too. But now that he's in this unique position, he's fought in England. I mean, he went to England to win his first world title in 2014 against Ricky Burns. So Crawford's the type of guy that's not afraid of, traveling to different countries. I think that would be huge. Heck, I would go there for that fight. Pretend to be Australian, speaking an accent, and maybe ride a kangaroo into the fight and get bucked into the arena. That would be unique.
Yeah, I just think there was something, and you could probably confirm this. There was something that I had watched the post-fight press conference. There was something that stood out that Terence Crawford said. He was like, I think he said I'll be 36 in a couple of months. I've been doing this since I was 7. Like statements like that make you wonder, like, is this guy going to start talking about potentially retiring, or is he just is in his own way stating, I'm only doing big fights at this point, big fights that generate the most amount of money. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about that, I think the two biggest fights right now for him, I would think, are Jamel Charlo, at 154, if he's allowed to keep his titles, and then, another rematch with Errol Spence.
Yeah. So I mean, I'd say he has about 2 to 3 fights left because, during fight week, someone asked him if he was willing to catch Floyd Mayweather's 50, and he said he can keep that. It's like, so I think the person was like, so does that mean you're not going to fight to 50? He goes, no, I'm not. So it's either between 40 and 50. So he's not going to fight 10 more times. So now we're talking between 1 to 5, maybe even 1 to 3. Just really depends. And I don't blame him. Boxing is the hurt business. And the longer you stay in, the longer people tend to get hurt. So getting out sooner with all your money and your marbles is the best option.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I just, with the performance that he put on over the weekend, it kind of puts you in one of them situations where it's like, man, I wish he wasn't 36. I wish he was like 25. So we could get 10 more years of this guy. But I mean, obviously we can't. It really seems like he left one of his best performances for the end of his year. I'll ask you this last question, man, and then I'll let you go. Obviously, top 10 pound for pound is a difficult thing to do right off the top of the head. What would be your top 5 right now?
Oh, let's see. I hate pound for pound lists because it's all subjective. So I got to think about this one. Obviously, Terence Crawford is number 1. In a way, was probably pound for pound number 1 for about 3 days.
Yeah.
So he was on number 1. Because I told this guy, he's like, well, I don't expect Crawford to dominate and destroy Errol Spence. But if he does, you have no choice but to put him there because of the level of the fight. And then, well, he did. So Crawford's number 1. In a way, is number 2. I think number 3, I would have to put Usyk. You think about his reign at cruiserweight to become undisputed there. He beat every champion in their backyard. He didn't even fight at home once. Knocked everyone out. Well, he didn't knock everyone out, but I mean, he embarrassed everyone in their own backyard. And then you go to heavyweight and you beat Joshua twice. So I think it's cut and clear that he's number 3. Oh, geez. Who should be number 4? Like I said, I don't like pound for pound lists. I feel like they're kind of a pain. I guess you put Bivol. He beat Canelo. People were like, oh, but Canelo was a blown up light heavyweight, blah blah blah. I don't want to hear that nonsense because going into the fight, Bernard Hopkins was saying that Canelo was going to turn Bivol into a plate of mashed potatoes. Well, what happened to that? So yeah, you have to put Bivol number 4. He's been inactive. I know he's going through a divorce right now, so there's that. He's been trying to get guys to fight him, but he's had multiple guys turn down fights with him. Dan Aziz and Joshua Boatsi will be fighting for an eliminator. So the winner is going to get Bivol. And I know Boatsi initially turned down Bivol because his team and him, they didn't feel ready for Bivol yet, which, I'll give them credit for that they said that. And then let's see, at number 5, who do I have to put there? I guess you have to put Devin Haney. You had to put Devin Haney up there. Haney or Charlo. Either Haney or Charlo, you gotta put within the top 5. You know, Haney's win over Loma was I guess it was controversial. It was pretty close. I mean, if you had it 7-5 either way, I don't really can't really, blame anyone for having that. But Haney, even though, his last fight could have gone either way. Yeah, I guess that'd be my top 5. How about you? Maybe I can think of maybe you can think of names more better than me.
Top 3 is always easy, right? So, and literally in the exact same order that you have it. Top 3 is pretty, and I think this is probably the easiest it's been to pick a top 3 in probably 5 or so years, maybe even longer. I mean, yeah, I don't think you could go wrong with Jamel. I think Errol is probably, for most people, is going to drop out of that top 5. I know he surfed somewhere around 4 and 5 for most people. I think he was like 4. He was sitting at 5 on like ESPN's pound for pound list.
I know Fighting just dropped him off. The company that I work with, I don't run their pound for pound rankings, but they dropped him out. But I feel like Teofimo Lopez is very close to the top 5 because of his win over Josh Taylor. You can consider, I know, like technically Teofimo Lopez is not a 2-time undisputed because Josh Taylor had to vacate nearly all of his belts. But really, he is a 2-time undisputed champion because Josh Taylor did not lose his undisputed championship in the ring. He lost it in legal proceedings.
Yeah, right.
So really, you could say that Crawford and Teofimo are both 2-time undisputed. So Tio has to be up there, but because he had that loss to Kambosos, I can't have him in front of Haney yet. But hey, if Devin and Josh, Devin and Tio end up fighting down the line, that could decide that spot.
Yeah, I think either one of those guys that you mentioned, Jamel and Haney. A lot of people, I still don't believe that they're going to give it to Bivol to have him that high because there's still the concept of that he was too big for Canelo. That's kind of one of the reasons I was hoping that Canelo would want to take the fight at 168, but I'm not sure he wants to put those belts on the line. Or at the same time, I don't think he wants the excuse that, well, Bivol was weight drained or something like that coming down to 168. So I understand it on both sides. But yeah, man, I think any of those guys are interchangeable. Haney, Jamel, or Bivol up there at the top 5. And I don't. I mean, some people could say Tyson Fury. Obviously, he hasn't fought in a while though. So those would be my picks. But yeah, man, appreciate you taking the time, man, to come and talk with me again.
Anytime, dude.
It's always good sitting down talking with you, man, especially after a big week like this one. And we had, I almost feel spoiled. I almost feel extremely spoiled. You get a great fight Tuesday morning, and then you get a great pay-per-view Saturday night. So we need more of these. Boxing needs more of these.
It's supposed to be the biggest week, the most competitive week in boxing, and it turned out to be the most one-sided week in boxing.
Yeah, both fights.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you combine the 2 fights, I think like one guy won all the rounds except for, maybe Spence. Maybe may have won the first round. Some people gave Spence the first, and that was it because in a way beat Fulton the entire fight. So yeah, it was a blowout for the whole week.
Yeah, I mean, when do you get 2 generational talents in the same week? Like that's
not since the 1980s. It's been a while. I wasn't even alive for that, so definitely not in my lifetime.
That's going to be tough to find. But hey, look, man, appreciate you again coming and talking with me.
Man. We'll see you on the video game, hopefully, if we get any updates on that.
Yeah, undisputed, man. Hey, look, I do people dirty on there. Okay, don't campaign for that too much.
All right. I'll see you, man.
All right, man.
All right. See ya.